You may have noticed that Britain, like most European countries, have taken tens of millions of immigrants over the past few decades, many of them from the Muslim world. Now, if you look at it objectively, you can see that Islam has struggled to fit into the Western world. There's issues with grooming gangs, Islamic values versus Christian values, and so on. On top of that, you often hear from Muslims themselves that we're evil and racist and it's horrible living here and we attack their lands and are evil colonizers. And that's always begged the question for me, if many of them don't like it here and they don't like us, why did they come here in the first place? Why didn't they opt to go to the Muslim world, and why didn't the Muslim world accept them? Now, I think the answer as to why Muslims come to the West is quite obvious. A, it's not nearly as bad as they make out. In fact, they're more free here than they would be anywhere else. B, they get lots of freebies in the Western world that they wouldn't get anywhere else. And C, they have such big communities now, they can literally live in their own semi-autonomous enclave and not really interact with the rest of British society or European culture if they're in a different country. But a more complicated question to answer is, why didn't the Muslim world say to Muslims who are looking for a new home, come over here to Saudi Arabia, Dubai and so forth? I mean, after all, they've got loads of money, by the way, money that the West showed them how to earn after they discovered the oil and created all the infrastructure to pump it out of the ground and sell it on the global marketplace. You never hear that one mentioned too much when Muslims and liberals are talking about how evil the Western world is. On top of that, they have absolutely loads of space, they're growing and expanding economies that could use the workforce, and as I said earlier, they're Muslims. I mean, they're a perfect fit, aren't they? But this is where the waters start to get very murky. Just take the Israel-Palestine situation at the moment. There are loads of Palestinian refugees, and UAE, Saudi Arabia, all refuse to take any of them in. There was me thinking Muslims were supposed to do anything for their religion's brothers. However, in Saudi Arabia, Palestinians can't even apply for citizenship as any other nationality can. So something isn't quite adding up here. And firstly, it's the obvious thing. The Saudis and the UAE aren't quite the loving people we've been told they are. But in my view, what's really happening is they're playing a longer strategy. They don't want the Arab nationalism of the Palestinians. They don't want the trouble that brings, because they're on a massive marketing campaign right now. You may have noticed that Dubai especially shows itself off as something of a multicultural utopia in the way a Blairite may. Now, it obviously does this to try and prove its credentials as a modern city, up-to-date, liberal and so on. However, really, it's sort of a multiculturalism of the Ubermensch. What I mean by this is Dubai isn't inviting just anybody in, like the Western world is, like the UK is, for instance. It's inviting the very top-level people from all around the world to be CEOs, to take new job roles that they're creating. Now add to that the stringent Islamic law, and essentially what you've got is a set of highly educated people out there simply for the money, all adhering to the political paradigm of the state over there. They then present that as a multicultural success, but really that's not quite what's going on. But as I say, this is all a strategy that you're seeing in China and the Middle East. They know they don't have to do anything. They don't have to get involved in geopolitics. They can simply watch the West destroy itself from afar and then pick up the remains and dominate on the global scale. This is why they don't want to take in the poor Muslims. They want them to go to Europe. They want Europe to deal with this problem, and they want to see Europe become Islamified with it. And while they're happy to see the Muslim poor flock to the West, they want to take the best of the West out. And remember, as I've discussed before on this channel, most Western men these days and women are drawn by money. We've lost our deeper value system. We've lost our nation. We've lost the idea of God, of family, of society. Henceforth, the only thing we live for now is how much money can I earn. It would seem to me that if you can look in your heart and find something that's more important than self-interest and your own immediate dependence, then England and Europe still lives. So in essence, we're seeing something of a brain drain, and that's only going to get worse under Keir Starmer. It's getting worse across Europe. However, another thing that really tells us what's going on is the treatment in Dubai and Saudi of workers from India and Bangladesh. And remember, the Bangladeshis are Muslims too, but they're more than happy to use this cheap workforce to build their skyscrapers and sports stadiums, even when some of them are dying due to the heat. And you may have noticed, if anybody raises this, their comeback will be, yeah, well, you had colonialism and are evil and racist, and we're so liberal and stupid, we go, oh, yeah, fair enough, sorry, crack on. But why can't we see what's going on in the Western world? Well, the answer to that is quite simple. The Western world has been dominant for so long that we've forgotten that the world still functions around power structures. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm saying that's human nature. It's a harsh truth we have to get used to. However, we're completely unaware of that in the Western world. We believe everybody has these universal values now of tolerance and love and equality. This is why, personally, I think we have to start thinking beyond the nation for two key reasons. One thing that gets my back up here is the talk of minorities we have in the Western world, which is actually quite myopic. If you look on the global scale, European peoples are actually a massive minority. And not only are we a tiny minority, but an increasingly disliked one due to leftist ideology and the talk of colonialism and white privilege and so on. So it just seems obvious to me that we should be very careful importing millions upon millions of people into our only home. After all, if the multicultural experiment doesn't work, we're screwed. And again, these things are just obvious, but if you mention any of it in the mainstream, you're seen as some nutcase evil monster who wants to start World War III. And as I've said before, I believe in peace and love to all people from all groups. I'm a Christian. However, as part of being a Christian is believing in justice too, and it doesn't seem to me like we're planning this out very well at all. Another reason I think we have to think beyond the nation is because we have these petty battles still going on in Europe. The English don't like the French, the Poles don't like the Germans, and so on and so on. Now, I know there are vast historical battles here, but I think we have to think a bit bigger. If we want to maintain Western culture and not get swallowed by liberalism, multiculturalism, and mass immigration, we're going to have to realise we've got a lot more in common than we do in difference. And again, if a liberal heard me say that, I'm sure they'd call me evil and stupid and hateful and so forth, but I don't understand where there's any hate in any of this. It just seems very basic facts of life. After all, is it really evil and hateful to wish Europeans to be the majority people in Europe, for Western culture to be dominant in the West? And as I've said many times, if the people of Europe aren't fussed about being a minority in their own continent, they're all liberal, rational humanists now, then fine, I won't personally agree, but I'll get on with my life and won't bother anybody. But it seems to me that the people of Europe don't want that, and every time they try and ask about it or vote against it, they're told they're evil and hateful, and on it goes. So it seems to me that we have to open our eyes and realise we're in a changing world. The power structures are changing. It's not the 1980s anymore. Anyway, these are just some of my thoughts. Do let me know what you think down below, and do consider subscribing to the channel.